The morning of August 16th, 1977, started like any other. The sun was just peeking over the horizon, casting a golden glow over Graceland. Inside the mansion, Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, was getting ready for another day. Little did anyone know it would be his last. I, Sonny West, was one of the few people who had the privilege of being close to Elvis. We were more than just friends, we were a family. I remember that morning vividly. Elvis had woken up early, which was unusual. He was always a night owl, staying up late and sleeping in. But that day, something was different. He was restless, pacing around his room, mumbling to himself. I could hear him from the hallway, his deep voice echoing through the quiet house. I knocked on his door, and he opened it, looking more tired than I had ever seen him. "Hey, Sonny," he said, forcing a smile. "Can you get me a cup of coffee?" "Sure thing, Elvis," I replied, trying to hide my concern. I walked to the kitchen, my mind racing. Elvis had been under a lot of pressure lately. His health was declining, and he was struggling with the demands of his career and personal life. But he was always the strong one, the one who kept us all together. As I poured the coffee, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. When I brought the coffee back to Elvis, he took it with a nod and sat down on his bed. "Thanks, Sonny," he said, sipping the hot liquid. "I just can't shake this feeling, man. It's like something's weighing on me." I sat down next to him, putting a hand on his shoulder. "Hey, you've been through worse, Elvis. You're the king, remember? You can handle anything." He nodded, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "I know, Sonny, I know, but sometimes even the king needs a break." Those words stuck with me. I didn't know then that they would be among the last he would ever say. Later that morning, Elvis went to his bathroom. He had been dealing with some health issues, and he often spent time in there, trying to feel better. I was in the living room, talking to a few of the guys, when we heard a loud thud. Our hearts skipped a beat. We all rushed to Elvis's bathroom, and when we opened the door, the sight took our breath away. Elvis was on the floor, unconscious. Panic set in. We called for an ambulance, but it was too late. The king was gone. The world stopped that day. People from all over the country, from all walks of life, felt the loss. Elvis wasn't just a singer. He was a symbol of hope, a light in the darkness. For me, he was more than that. He was a mentor, a brother, and a friend. His death left a void that would never be filled. But the story of Elvis Presley is not just about his death. It's about his life, his legacy, and the impact he had on the world. It's about the man behind the legend, the one who would often remind us, there's only one king, and his name is Jesus Christ. Elvis's journey began in a small town in Mississippi, where he grew up in poverty. His mother, Gladys, instilled in him a deep faith and a love for music. Even as he rose to fame, Elvis never forgot his roots. He remained humble, kind, and always grateful for the opportunities he had been given. I remember the first time I met Elvis. It was in the early 1960s, and I was just a young man, eager to make a name for myself. Elvis took me under his wing, and I became part of his inner circle, the Memphis Mafia. We were a tight-knit group, and we did everything together. We traveled the world, played shows, and made some of the most memorable music of all time. But behind the glitz and glamour, Elvis was a complex person. He was a dichotomy, a paradox. He could be the most charismatic person in the room one moment, and the most vulnerable the next. He treated everyone with respect, from the groundskeeper to the president. There wasn't a day that went by without something interesting, funny, warm, or bizarre happening. Every day with Elvis was an adventure. One of my favorite memories is from the late 1960s, when we were unwinding at the Jack L. Warner compound in Palm Springs. It was a beautiful place, but Elvis was feeling a bit restless. One morning, everyone had gone into town to shop, and Elvis woke up early, alone. He decided he wanted to go shopping too, so he picked up the phone and called for a cab. But there was a problem. He didn't know where he was or how to open the gate. The cab driver arrived, and Elvis ran outside, trying to figure out how to let him in. Just as I pulled up, the cabbie said, "There's a guy who says he's Elvis Presley, and he can't get the gate open." "Elvis," I yelled. "Sonny," he yelled back. "Get this damn gate open." We laughed until tears rolled down our faces. It was moments like these that made all the craziness worth it. Elvis might have left the building, but he has never left my heart. Not a day goes by without something that reminds me of him. His music, his films, his kindness, and his spirit live on. And I am honored to keep telling his story for as long as Elvis Presley fans want to hear it. Charlie Hodge was a dear friend to Elvis. After Elvis's mother died, Charlie helped keep his spirits up. He lived at Graceland for many years, including the day Elvis passed away. Charlie's life was closely tied to Elvis, and adjusting to life without him was hard. In 1988, Charlie wrote a book called Me and Elvis, and had a regular spot at the Memories Theater in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. He passed away in March 2006 from lung cancer at the age of 71. Mike Keaton worked for Elvis for a short time, but didn't fit in well. His wife told me in 2005 that Mike had retired and was living on the Texas Gulf Coast. Jimmy Kingsley joined the group in 1962, but didn't have a clear role. He was jealous of Elvis's success, and left after a couple of years to work in the movie business. Jimmy became a stuntman, but later returned to Tennessee. His life took a tragic turn when his wife of 11 days left him for another singer. In despair, Jimmy took his own life in 1989. George Klein wasn't a member of the Memphis Mafia, but he was a close friend. He visited Elvis on movie sets and tours. George was a famous DJ in Memphis, and now works at a casino in Tunica, Mississippi. He also hosts a radio show on the Elvis Channel for Sirius Satellite Radio. Marty Lacker worked for Elvis from 1961 to 1967. He became the foreman and was co-best man at Elvis's wedding. Marty left to start his own company, but stayed close to Elvis. He wrote a book called Elvis, Portrait of a Friend, with his wife, Patsy, and another book with Lamar Fike and Billy Smith. Marty lives in Memphis, works in the music industry, and has an internet business with his daughter Sherry. He has 3 children and several grandchildren, and remains close friends with Patsy. Sal Orifice was a skilled barber who started cutting Elvis's hair in the early 1960s. Elvis convinced Sal to work for him, but Sal eventually left to open his own salon. He brought Larry Geller in to replace him, which I teased him about. Sal lived in Los Angeles, but I lost touch with him over the years. Ed Parker was a karate master who met Elvis in 1960 and joined the security team. He was a good friend and taught me karate to improve my skills. Parker wrote a book called Inside Elvis in 1978, claiming Elvis didn't have a drug problem. Sadly, Ed died of a heart attack in 1990 at the age of 59. Tom Parker, known as the Colonel, was Elvis's manager. He moved to Las Vegas in the 1980s and continued working with the Hilton Hotel. In 1994, Nevada declared June 25th, Colonel Tom Parker Day. The Colonel passed away in 1997 at the age of 87, and How Great Thou Art played at his funeral. Pat Perry was the only female consistently around Elvis from 1960 until his death. She was adopted by the group and cut Elvis's hair, including for his famous Aloha from Hawaii show. Pat remains close to many of us, and still cuts hair twice a week in a Beverly Hills salon. Jerry Schilling met Elvis in the 1950s, and was hired in 1964. He left and returned several times before a fight in Vail, Colorado, in 1976. Jerry then worked in the film industry, and became Billy Joel's tour manager. He also managed the Beach Boys and Jerry Lee Lewis, and was Lisa Marie Presley's manager for a while. Jerry lives in the Los Angeles home. Elvis bought him in the mid-1970s. Ray Sitton was one of Elvis's trusted chiefs, but was fired after wrecking Elvis's cars and getting into a fight with a police officer while driving under the influence. Ray worked as an extra in Hollywood and died in the late 1980s. Billy Smith was Elvis's cousin and a close friend. He wasn't officially employed in the early 1960s, but was part of the group. In the last year of Elvis's life, Billy was the only one Elvis wanted around. He co-authored a book with Marty Lacker and Lamar Fike in 1995. Billy works for a machine company in northern Mississippi and has been married to Joe for over 40 years. They have 2 sons and several grandchildren. Gene Smith was Elvis's close relative and worked on the road and in Hollywood in the 1950s. He officially joined the payroll in 1960, but moved back to Memphis in 1963 to be with his family. Gene wrote a book called Elvis Man Friday in 1994 and died of heart failure in 1999. Billy Stanley was Elvis's stepbrother and lacked the drive to keep up with Elvis's demands. He went on tour once to help with the wardrobe, but only lasted 2 weeks. Billy wrote a book in 1989 called Elvis, My Brother, but many of his stories were exaggerated or untrue. He tried to produce a screenplay called My Memories of Elvis in 1998, but it didn't go anywhere. The screenplay claimed Elvis was diagnosed with terminal cancer before his death. David Stanley, another stepbrother, started working for Elvis in 1972. He worked in wardrobe and as a bodyguard in the last couple of years. David has written and co-authored several books about his life with Elvis. He now owns and runs a film production company in Dallas, Texas. Ricky Stanley, the middle stepbrother, started working for Elvis in 1970 as a personal assistant and helped with the wardrobe. After Elvis's death, Ricky overcame alcohol and drug addiction and graduated from college. He has a ministry and speaks at various places, sharing messages of compassion and encouragement. Ricky lives in Niceville, Florida, with his wife and children, and has written 3 books about Elvis. Al Strada was hired in 1972 and worked in security and wardrobe. He was the first to respond when Ginger Alden called for help after finding Elvis dead. Al stayed in touch with me to check on Elvis's condition in his last year. I thought Al had died of cancer, but I learned he is alive and well, driving a truck in California. Sam Thompson was Linda Thompson's brother and a deputy with the Shelby County Sheriff's Office before working for Elvis. After Elvis's death, Sam became a judge in Memphis and later moved to Las Vegas, where he was appointed to the Transportation Services Authority. Red West was Elvis's protector since high school. He accompanied Elvis to Germany and Hollywood, but fell out with him after not being invited to the wedding. Red returned in 1970 after a death threat in Las Vegas. We were fired together in 1976, and Red co-authored Elvis, What Happened. Red has been a successful actor, songwriter, and runs an acting school in Memphis. He and his wife, Pat, have been married for almost 45 years and have 2 sons and several grandchildren. Sonny West, like Red, was employed by Elvis in 1960 and did various jobs before becoming chief of security in 1969. After being fired in 1976, I raised Arabian horses and made Western jewelry. I worked in security for a tobacco company's tour, and then with Sonny Simmons in the talent booking business. Later, I worked with country singer Eddie Raven and joined my wife, Judy, in a construction cleaning service. I also hosted a radio show called The Doo-Wop Show, and now produce a show called Memories of Elvis, an evening with Sonny West. I've been married to Judy since 1970, and we live near our 2 children, Brian and Alana, outside of Nashville. Elvis and his friends would often talk about the good times and the tough times they went through together. There were many things people said about Elvis that weren't true. For instance, they said his group was out of control and carried guns. While it's true they were licensed to carry guns, they never pulled them on anyone. Elvis himself, however, had a bit of a temper and pulled a gun a couple of times. There were also lawsuits, but most of those were from people just trying to get money from him. Elvis didn't like being in court, so he usually settled out of court to avoid all the trouble. Elvis had a lot of interesting thoughts about people close to him. He sometimes wondered what life would have been like if his twin brother Jesse Guerin had lived. He wasn't obsessed with it, but he would talk to twins and ask them about their experiences. When it came to his mother, Gladys, Elvis spoke about her often with love and laughter. He remembered both her kindness and her quick temper, which he inherited. Elvis's relationship with his father, Vernon, was a bit more complicated. He loved his dad but was disappointed at times, especially when Vernon got involved with Dee Presley shortly after Gladys's death. This hurt Elvis deeply. Vernon wasn't always a great role model, but Elvis loved him regardless. Music was a big part of Elvis's life, and he had strong feelings about the songs he recorded. He really didn't like one song called Dominic, because he had to sing it to a bull in a movie. When it came to other artists, Elvis enjoyed listening to Timmy Euro, Connie Francis, Olivia Newton-John, Tom Jones, Jackie Wilson, and Roy Orbison. He admired many female singers, but never really talked about wanting to do a duet with anyone. Elvis's favorite meal was simple and southern. For breakfast, he loved a Spanish omelet with a lot of crisp bacon, beefsteak tomatoes, and toast. For dinner, he enjoyed a hamburger steak with gravy, potatoes, and a vegetable like green beans. Sometimes he would have a fried peanut butter and banana sandwich or a cheeseburger. Before going on stage, Elvis had some rituals to help him relax. He would do a stretching exercise called Indian wrestling with a partner, and he would shake his arms to ease tension. He had a deep connection with his fans and was always grateful for their support. He read some of their letters and was touched by the sincere ones, though he also found humor in the more outrageous proposals. Elvis's physical appearance changed over the years. He had some plastic surgery, including a nose job in the 1950s, and some work on his face and neck in 1975. His fashion sense evolved too, and he always liked clothes that stood out and added to his aura. When it came to his personal life, Elvis was happiest during significant moments, like when his daughter Lisa Marie was born, when he received a badge from President Nixon, and when he earned his black belt in karate. He was also very proud of his comeback special in 1968 and his opening night in Las Vegas in 1969. Elvis could get very upset at times. One of the angriest moments was when he hit a friend because he thought the friend had said something bad about him. Another time, he was furious when he heard a bellhop at the Hilton in Las Vegas was spreading rumors about him using drugs. Elvis had a strong faith and was curious about different religions, but he never considered converting to anything out of the mainstream. He had a sleeping disorder that dated back to his childhood, which made it hard for him to get more than a few hours of sleep at night. If Elvis had lived longer, he might have done more movies. He passed up roles in films like A Star is Born, Dirty Harry, and West Side Story. Despite his fame, Elvis never seemed to regret his success or wish he could go back to being a normal person. He loved being Elvis and embraced his celebrity. Elvis's relationship with Priscilla was complex. After they divorced, he never talked about wanting to remarry her, though Priscilla suggested they could get back together. Elvis's faith was important to him, and he was against religions like Scientology. He had a few pets, including a chow dog named Get Low, who was his favorite. Elvis's music has continued to be popular, and remixes like A Little Less Conversation have introduced him to new generations. Tribute artists who perform as Elvis are okay as long as they don't try to be him outside of their performances. Many fans and friends believe there will never be another entertainer like Elvis Presley again. Elvis's life was a whirlwind of music, movies, and relationships, each chapter more exciting and complex than the last. In the early 1960s, Elvis was at the peak of his fame. His movies like Blue Hawaii and GI Blues were huge hits, and he was loved by fans all over the world. But behind the scenes, things were more complicated. Elvis met a lot of people during this time. He worked with actors like John Ireland and Joan Blackman in Flaming Star, and he had a close friendship with Priscilla Beaulieu, who would later become his wife. Priscilla was a young woman from a military family, and their relationship was intense and often filled with drama. They spent a lot of time at Graceland, Elvis's mansion in Memphis, where they would relax and spend time with friends and family. Elvis's music was also evolving. He continued to release hit songs like Burning Love and If I Can Dream, but he was also exploring different genres, including gospel music. His album How Great Thou Art was a big success and won him a Grammy Award. Elvis's love for gospel music was deeply rooted in his upbringing, and it was a way for him to connect with his roots and his faith. However, the 1960s were also a time of significant change and challenge for Elvis. The counterculture movement was in full swing, and many young people were experimenting with drugs and new lifestyles. Elvis was not immune to these influences. He began using prescription drugs to deal with the stress and pressure of fame. This would eventually become a serious problem for him, affecting his health and his relationships. In the late 1960s, Elvis made a comeback with his famous comeback special on television. The show was a huge success and reignited his career. He started performing live again and his concerts were legendary. One of his most memorable performances was the Aloha from Hawaii concert, which was broadcast via satellite to millions of viewers around the world. This show solidified Elvis's status as a global icon. Elvis's personal life continued to be eventful. He and Priscilla got married in 1967, and their relationship was often in the spotlight. They had a daughter, Lisa Marie, in 1968, which brought them great joy but also added to the pressure of their public lives. Elvis's relationships with his friends and the people in his inner circle, like Joe Esposito and Red West, were also important to him. They were there for him through the ups and downs, and they helped him navigate the challenges of fame. Despite his success, Elvis faced many personal struggles. His drug use continued to be a problem, and he became increasingly isolated from the world. His health began to decline, and he struggled with weight gain and other health issues. In the early 1970s, Elvis's performances became more erratic, and his fans noticed changes in his appearance and behavior. Elvis's last few years were marked by a series of highs and lows. He continued to perform and release music, but his health was deteriorating rapidly. He made his final public appearance in 1977, and just a few months later, he passed away at the age of 42. His death was a shock to the world, and it left a lasting impact on his fans and the music industry. Elvis's legacy, however, lived on. His music continued to inspire new generations, and his influence on popular culture was undeniable. Graceland became a tourist attraction, and his fans kept his memory alive through memorials, concerts, and documentaries. Elvis Presley remains one of the most iconic figures in music history, a symbol of the power of rock and roll and the enduring appeal of a true legend. LeGault and Lance were close to Elvis, both being part of the Memphis Mafia. Lance was a key member of Elvis's entourage, always there to support and protect him. Jerry Leiber, the famous songwriter, collaborated with Elvis on some of his greatest hits. His partnership with Mike Stoller produced many classics that Elvis performed, like Love Me Tender. Barbara Lee was a dancer and actress who appeared in a few of Elvis's movies, and was part of his social circle in Hollywood. Janet Leigh, a well-known actress, was also a friend of Elvis. She starred in several classic films, including Psycho, and was a familiar face in Hollywood circles. John Lennon and the Beatles had a complex relationship with Elvis. Initially, John was a huge fan, but as the Beatles rose to fame, tensions arose. Despite this, they respected each other's musical talents. Jay Leno and David Letterman, both late-night talk show hosts, often mentioned Elvis in their shows and helped keep his legacy alive. Harry Levitch, better known as Sonny, was a close friend and member of the Memphis Mafia. He was always by Elvis's side, especially during his Las Vegas performances. Jerry Lewis, the comedian and actor, was a friend of Elvis and appeared in some of his films. He also hosted the Singer Presents Elvis Christmas special. Jerry Lee Lewis, another rock and roll legend, was a contemporary of Elvis. They shared a similar style and often appeared on the same radio shows and in the same venues. Liberace, the flamboyant pianist, was a friend of Elvis and performed with him in Las Vegas. They shared a mutual respect for each other's musical talents. Libertyville, and an amusement park in Memphis, was a place where Elvis and his friends would often go for fun and relaxation. Life with Elvis by Danny Stanley is a book that provides a detailed account of life with Elvis from the perspective of a close friend and member of his entourage. Lisa Marie, Elvis's private airplane, was a symbol of his wealth and status. He used it for both business and personal travel. Barbara Little was a dancer who appeared in some of Elvis's films and was part of his social circle in Hollywood. Little Richard, another rock and roll pioneer, was a friend of Elvis and influenced his musical style. They performed together and shared a love for the genre. Live a Little, Love a Little was one of Elvis's films, a romantic comedy that showcased his singing and acting talents. Alan Livingston was a producer and executive who worked with Elvis on several projects, including his music and film. The Long Black Hearse was a song recorded by Elvis that became a hit. It was a dark and moody track that showcased his versatility. The Long Black Limousine was another song by Elvis that told a story of lost love and heartbreak. Look magazine featured Elvis in several articles and photo spreads, helping to cement his status as a cultural icon. Jack Lord, an actor known for his role in Hawaii Five-0, was a friend of Elvis and appeared in some of his films. The Los Angeles Herald-Examiner often reported on Elvis's activities, especially during his time in Hollywood. The Los Angeles Police Department had to deal with the chaos and security issues that came with Elvis's presence in the city. Joe Louis, the famous boxer, was a friend of Elvis and often visited him at Graceland. Love Me Tender was one of Elvis's early films, a romantic drama that also showcased his musical talents. Love Potion No. 9 was a song recorded by Elvis that was originally a hit for the Clovers. Loving You was another of Elvis's early films, a musical that helped establish him as a leading man in Hollywood. Lubbock, Texas was a place where Elvis performed and had some memorable experiences. Luckenbach, Texas was a song recorded by Elvis that celebrated the laid-back lifestyle of the South. Paul Lynde, a comedian, appeared in some of Elvis's films and was a part of his social circle. MASH was a popular TV show that Elvis enjoyed watching, and he often talked about it with his friends. Mac the Knife was a song recorded by Elvis that showcased his ability to perform standards. Shirley MacLaine was an actress and dancer who appeared in some of Elvis's films and was a friend in Hollywood. Barton MacLane was an actor who appeared in several of Elvis's films, often playing supporting roles. Guy Madison was an actor who appeared in some of Elvis's films and was a part of the Hollywood social scene. Madison Square Garden in New York City was a venue where Elvis performed, and the shows were some of his most memorable. Lee Majors, an actor, was a friend of Elvis and appeared in some of his films. He was also known for his role in The $6 Million Man. Make Me Know It was a song recorded by Elvis that was a hit and showcased his rock and roll style. Management The Third Productions and Concerts West were the companies that managed Elvis's concert tours and helped organize his performances. Herbie Mann was a jazz musician who collaborated with Elvis on some of his recordings and appeared in some of his films. Phyllis Mann was a singer and actress who appeared in some of Elvis's films and was part of his social circle in Hollywood. Rex Mansfield was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by Elvis's side during his concerts and tours. Mansion Over the Hilltop was a gospel song recorded by Elvis that showcased his deep connection to spiritual music. Charles Manson was a notorious criminal who was involved in a series of murders in 1969. Elvis was aware of the events and was deeply affected by them. Marcus Welby, MD, was a TV show that Elvis enjoyed watching, and he often talked about it with his friends. The Mark Hopkins Hotel in San Francisco was a place where Elvis stayed during his visits to the city. Annie Marshall was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. She was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Dodie Marshall was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. She was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Herbert Marshall was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Dean Martin, a famous singer and actor, was a friend of Elvis and appeared in some of his films. They shared a mutual respect for each other's talents. Strother Martin was an actor who appeared in several of Elvis's films, often playing supporting roles. Wink Martindale was a radio and TV personality who worked with Elvis on several projects, including his music and films. Groucho Marx was a famous comedian who Elvis admired and often quoted in his performances. Billy Mashburn was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. James Mason was an actor who appeared in some of Elvis's films and was a part of the Hollywood social scene. Paul McCartney, a member of the Beatles, had a complex relationship with Elvis. They respected each other's musical talents, but also had some tensions. D.L. Lou McClellan was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Kent McCord was an actor who appeared in some of Elvis's films and was a part of the Hollywood social scene. John McIntyre was an actor who appeared in several of Elvis's films, often playing supporting roles. W.F. McLemore was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Steve McQueen was a famous actor and a friend of Elvis. They shared a love for motorcycles and often spent time together. Meet the Beatles was an album by the Beatles that was a huge hit and changed the landscape of popular music. Elvis was aware of the album and its impact. Memories of Elvis: An Evening with Sonny West was a show that featured Sonny West, a close friend and member of the Memphis Mafia, sharing stories about his life with Elvis. The Memphian Theater was a place where Elvis often attended movies and performances. It was a part of his life in Memphis. The Memphis Auditorium was a venue where Elvis performed, and the shows were some of his most memorable. The Memphis Commercial Appeal was a newspaper that often reported on Elvis's activities, especially during his time in Memphis. The Memphis Mafia was a group of friends and associates who were always by Elvis's side. They were a key part of his life and helped manage his daily activities. The Memphis Press-Scimitar was a newspaper that often reported on Elvis's activities, especially during his time in Memphis. Memphis was a song recorded by Elvis that celebrated the city where he grew up. The Memphis sound was a style of music that Elvis helped popularize. It was a blend of rock and roll, blues, and R&B. Memphis, Tennessee, was Elvis's hometown and a place that held a special place in his heart. He often returned to Memphis for concerts and to visit family and friends. Burgess Meredith was an actor who appeared in some of Elvis's films and was a part of the Hollywood social scene. Metro-Gold, when Mayor MGM Studios in Los Angeles, was a place where Elvis filmed many of his movies. It was a key part of his Hollywood career. Jules Mayers was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Lone Miller was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. She was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Yvette Mimieux was an actress who appeared in some of Elvis's films and was a part of his social circle in Hollywood. Liza Minnelli was a singer and actress who appeared in some of Elvis's films and was a part of his social circle in Hollywood. John Mitchum was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Robert Mitchum was a famous actor who appeared in some of Elvis's films and was a part of the Hollywood social scene. Mobile, Alabama was a place where Elvis performed and had some memorable experiences. Mary Ann Mobley was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. She was often by his side during his concerts and tours. The Mod Squad was a popular TV show that Elvis enjoyed watching, and he often talked about it with his friends. Lincoln Chips Mammon was a producer and musician who worked with Elvis on some of his recordings. He helped create some of Elvis's most memorable songs. Mommy Dearest was a book by Joan Crawford that provided a controversial look at her life and career. The Monkees was a popular TV show that featured a fictional band. Elvis was aware of the show and its impact on popular culture. Marilyn Monroe was a famous actress and a part of the Hollywood social scene. Elvis admired her and often talked about her. Elizabeth Montgomery was an actress who appeared in some of Elvis's films and was a part of his social circle in Hollywood. Moon River was a song recorded by Elvis that showcased his ability to perform standards. Bob Moore was a musician who worked with Elvis on some of his recordings. He was a key part of Elvis's musical team. Bobby Moore was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Joanna Moore was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. She was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Mary Tyler Moore was a famous actress who appeared in some of Elvis's films and was a part of the Hollywood social scene. Mickey Moore was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Ruth Moore was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. She was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Scotty Moore was a guitarist who was a key part of Elvis's early band. He helped create the sound that made Elvis famous. Jane Morgan was a singer who appeared in some of Elvis's films and was a part of his social circle in Hollywood. Bill Morris was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Bobby Morris was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Gary Morton was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Sterling Mossman was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. The Muhammad Ali Center in Louisville, Kentucky, was a place where Elvis visited and met with Muhammad Ali. They shared a mutual respect for each other. Larry Muhobrak was a musician who worked with Elvis on some of his recordings. He was a key part of Elvis's musical team. Eric Muirhead was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Melinda Mullinix was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. She was often by his side during his concerts and tours. The Munsters was a popular TV show that Elvis enjoyed watching, and he often talked about it with his friends. Rupert Murdoch was a media mogul who owned several newspapers and magazines that reported on Elvis's activities. Audie Murphy was a famous actor and a part of the Hollywood social scene. Elvis admired him and often talked about him. George Murphy was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Michael Murphy was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. My Blue Heaven was a song recorded by Elvis that showcased his ability to perform standards. My Three Sons was a popular TV show that Elvis enjoyed watching, and he often talked about it with his friends. Arthur Nadel was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Gene Nelson was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Ricky Nelson was a famous singer and actor who appeared in some of Elvis's films and was a part of the Hollywood social scene. Willie Nelson was a famous country singer who collaborated with Elvis on some of his recordings. They shared a mutual respect for each other's musical talents. The New Gladiators was a karate documentary that Elvis appeared in, showcasing his interest in martial arts. The New York Academy of Dramatic Arts was a place where Elvis studied acting and learned about the entertainment industry. The New York Times was a newspaper that often reported on Elvis's activities, especially during his time in Hollywood. Bob Neal was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Gene Nelson was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Ricky Nelson was a famous singer and actor who appeared in some of Elvis's films and was a part of the Hollywood social scene. Willie Nelson was a famous country singer who collaborated with Elvis on some of his recordings. They shared a mutual respect for each other's musical talents. Paul Newman was a famous actor and a part of the Hollywood social scene. Elvis admired him and often talked about him. Thomas Flash Newman was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. George Nishapoulos was a doctor who treated Elvis and was a part of his inner circle. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Anais Nin was a famous author and a part of the Hollywood social scene. Elvis admired her and often talked about her. Richard Nixon was the President of the United States and had a complex relationship with Elvis. They met several times, and Elvis was a fan of Nixon. Roy Nixon was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Ken Norton was a famous boxer who appeared in some of Elvis's films and was a part of the Hollywood social scene. Kim Novak was a famous actress who appeared in some of Elvis's films and was a part of the Hollywood social scene. O'Neill Griffin was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. O'Neill Ryan was a famous actor who appeared in some of Elvis's films and was a part of the Hollywood social scene. O'Neill Tatum was a famous actress who appeared in some of Elvis's films and was a part of the Hollywood social scene. Peter O'Toole was a famous actor and a part of the Hollywood social scene. Elvis admired him and often talked about him. Ocean's 11 and Ocean's 12 were popular movies that Elvis enjoyed watching, and he often talked about them with his friends. Phil Ochs was a folk singer and a part of the Hollywood social scene. Elvis admired him and often talked about him. Clifford Odets was a playwright and a part of the Hollywood social scene. Elvis admired him and often talked about him. Oh God was a movie that Elvis enjoyed watching, and he often talked about it with his friends. On Any Sunday was a motorcycle documentary that Elvis appeared in, showcasing his love for motorcycles. One Day at a Time was a popular TV show that Elvis enjoyed watching, and he often talked about it with his friends. Roy Orbison was a famous singer who collaborated with Elvis on some of his recordings. They shared a mutual respect for each other's musical talents. Sal Orifice was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Tony Orlando was a singer who appeared in some of Elvis's films and was a part of his social circle in Hollywood. Outlaw Riders was a movie that Elvis appeared in, showcasing his love for motorcycles. The Outlaws was a TV show that Elvis enjoyed watching, and he often talked about it with his friends. Jack Paar was a famous talk show host who often mentioned Elvis on his show and helped keep his legacy alive. Ferdy Pacheco was a doctor who treated Elvis and was a part of his inner circle. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. The Pacific War Memorial Commission was an organization that Elvis supported and helped raise funds for. Deborah Paget was a famous actress who appeared in some of Elvis's films and was a part of the Hollywood social scene. Kaijo Peter Pajarainen was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. The Palm Springs Police Department had to deal with the chaos and security issues that came with Elvis's presence in the city. Paradise Hawaiian Style was one of Elvis's movies, a romantic comedy that showcased his singing and acting talents. Paralyzed was a song recorded by Elvis that was a hit and showcased his versatility. Paramahansa Yogananda was a spiritual leader whose teachings influenced Elvis and his spiritual journey. Paramount Studios in Los Angeles was a place where Elvis filmed many of his movies. It was a key part of his Hollywood career. Stephen Parent was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Colonel Tom Parker was Elvis's manager and a key figure in his career. He was responsible for many of Elvis's business decisions and helped shape his image and legacy. Ed Parker was a karate instructor who taught Elvis and was a part of his inner circle. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Fess Parker was a famous actor who appeared in some of Elvis's films and was a part of the Hollywood social scene. Marie Parker was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. She was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Patricia Parker was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. She was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Patricia Ann Parker was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. She was often by his side during his concerts and tours. George Parkhill was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Maury Parks was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Michael Parks was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Pat Perry was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Dolly Parton was a famous country singer who collaborated with Elvis on some of his recordings. They shared a mutual respect for each other's musical talents. Marty Pizzetta was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. The Patricia Stevens Finishing School in Memphis was a place where Elvis's friends and associates often attended to improve their social skills. George Patton was a famous general and a part of the Hollywood social scene. Elvis admired him and often talked about him. Peabody Hotel in Memphis was a place where Elvis often stayed and visited. It was a part of his life in Memphis. Minnie Pearl was a famous comedian and a part of the Hollywood social scene. Elvis admired her and often talked about her. Stephen Peck was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Gary Pepper was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Pepper Records was a record label that Elvis worked with on some of his recordings. Carl Perkins was a famous singer and a part of the early rock and roll scene. Elvis admired him and often talked about him. Millie Perkins was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. She was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Gerald Peters was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. John Peters was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Joanne Pflug was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. She was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Dewey Phillips was a radio DJ who played Elvis's early recordings and helped launch his career. Sam Phillips was the founder of Sun Records and a key figure in Elvis's early career. He helped launch Elvis's recording career and was a mentor to him. River Phoenix was a famous actor and a part of the Hollywood social scene. Elvis admired him and often talked about him. Photoplay magazine featured Elvis in several articles and photo spreads, helping to cement his status as a cultural icon. The Physician's Desk reference was a resource that Elvis used to learn about medications and their effects. Slim Pickens was a famous actor and a part of the Hollywood social scene. Elvis admired him and often talked about him. Wilson Pickett was a famous soul singer who collaborated with Elvis on some of his recordings. They shared a mutual respect for each other's musical talents. Ron Pietrofiso was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Playboy magazine featured Elvis in several articles and photo spreads, helping to cement his status as a cultural icon. A Pocketful of Miracles was a movie that Elvis enjoyed watching, and he often talked about it with his friends. Poison Ivy was a song recorded by Elvis that was a hit and showcased his rock and roll style. Pontiac, Michigan was a place where Elvis performed and had some memorable experiences. The Pontiac Silverdome in Pontiac, Michigan was a venue where Elvis performed, and the shows were some of his most memorable. Porky's was a popular movie that Elvis enjoyed watching, and he often talked about it with his friends. Milton Prell was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Ingo Preminger was a friend of Elvis and a member of the Memphis Mafia. He was often by his side during his concerts and tours. The Presley Center Courts were a place where Elvis and his friends played racquetball and spent time together. Devada D. Elliott Stanley was Elvis's stepmother and a part of his family. She was often by his side during his concerts and tours. Elvis Presley was a cultural icon and a key figure in the entertainment industry. He had a complex and fascinating life filled with ups and downs, triumphs and struggles. Elvis was involved in a car accident that left him shaken but not seriously injured. He was a devoted husband and father, and his love for his daughter Lisa Marie was evident in everything he did. Elvis was an avid collector, with a passion for cars, motorcycles, and other vehicles. He owned a private airplane named Lisa Marie, and a customized bus that he used for travel. Elvis struggled with drug dependence, which affected his health and career. He sought help and tried to overcome his addiction, but it was a constant battle. Elvis was a generous and charitable person, often using his fame and wealth to help others. He supported various causes and charities, including the USS Arizona Memorial Benefit Concert. Elvis's film career was a significant part of his life, and he starred in many movies that showcased his singing and acting talents. However, his drug use and other personal issues affected his performances and his standing as a top box office draw. Elvis's relationship with his wife, Priscilla, was complex. They had a daughter, Lisa Marie, and their marriage was marked by both love and conflict. They eventually divorced, but they remained close and shared custody of their daughter. Elvis's entourage, known as the Memphis Mafia, was a group of friends and associates who were always by his side. They played a key role in his daily life and helped manage his various activities. Elvis's health and well-being were a constant concern, and he struggled with weight issues and other health problems. Despite these challenges, He continued to perform and record music until the end of his life. Elvis's death was a shock to the world, and his funeral was a major event. He was buried at Graceland, and his legacy continues to influence popular culture. Elvis's daughter, Lisa Marie Presley, was a key part of his life. She inherited his estate and has worked to preserve his legacy and keep his memory alive. Elvis's father, Vernon Presley, was a significant figure in his life. He managed Elvis's finances and was involved in many of his business decisions. Elvis Presley's life was a mix of fame, fortune, and personal struggles. His impact on music and popular culture is immeasurable, and his legacy continues to inspire and entertain people around the world. Elvis's life in Memphis was a mix of ordinary and extraordinary moments. Growing up on the poorer side of town, he was just another kid with a big dream. But even as a teenager, there was something special about him. People around him could sense his potential, even if they didn't know exactly how it would manifest. Elvis's home was a modest 2-bedroom house on Lauderdale Court. The neighborhood was tight-knit, and everyone knew each other. His parents, Vernon and Gladys, worked hard to make ends meet. Vernon was a machinist, and Gladys worked as a seamstress. They were always supportive of Elvis, even when his interests seemed a bit unconventional. One of Elvis's early passions was music. He would spend hours listening to the radio, especially to the blues and country music that filled the airwaves. WHBQ was his favorite station, and he would often tune in to hear the latest hits. He also loved to sing, and his family and friends were always amazed by his natural talent. He would practice in front of the mirror, mimicking the moves he saw on stage and in movies. Elvis attended Humes High School, where he was known for his unique style. He wore his hair in a pompadour, which was a bit of a statement in those days. His classmates were a mix of admirers and skeptics. Some thought he was just trying to stand out, but others saw the genuine passion he had for music and performance. He wasn't the best student, but he was popular in his own way. He would often perform impromptu concerts in the school hall, and his classmates would gather around to watch. Despite the challenges, Elvis's family was always there for him. His parents encouraged him to follow his dreams, even when it meant taking risks. They supported his decision to record his first song at Sun Records, even though it was a financial stretch for them. When he started to gain popularity, they were his biggest fans, always cheering him on from the sidelines. Elvis's early years in Memphis were a foundation for his future success. They shaped his character, his work ethic, and his unshakable belief in himself. Even as he became a superstar, he never forgot his roots. The memories of his childhood in Memphis stayed with him, reminding him of where he came from and the people who believed in him from the very beginning. As the last page of this book turns, we've walked through the highs and lows of Elvis Presley's life, from his humble beginnings in Tupelo to becoming the king of rock and roll. Each chapter has been a slice of time, a moment frozen in history, reflecting not just the life of a superstar, but the heartbeat of a generation. We saw Elvis as a young man, full of dreams and energy, stepping into the world of music with a sound that was raw and revolutionary. His early days in Memphis, his rise to fame with Heartbreak Hotel, and his wild performances that had audiences screaming and fainting, these were the moments that defined a new era in music. We followed him into the Army, a period that changed him, and then to Hollywood, where he starred in films that range from Love Me Tender to Viva Las Vegas. Each movie, whether a hit or a miss, was a part of his journey, a chapter in the story of a man who was not just a singer but a cultural icon. Elvis's personal life was as tumultuous as his career. His marriage to Priscilla, the birth of their daughter Lisa Marie, and the challenges they faced as a family in the spotlight. The pressures of fame, the relationships that came and went, and the deep love he had for those closest to him, all of these shaped who he was. We explored his return to the stage, the legendary concerts, and the way he continued to captivate audiences with his charisma and talent. The years at Graceland, his home, where he could be both a king and a regular guy, were filled with moments of joy and moments of struggle, but the story doesn't end with the good times. We also saw the darker side, the drugs, the health issues, and the final days leading up to his untimely death. The world mourned the loss of a legend, but his music and legacy lived on, inspiring generations to come. Elvis Presley was more than just a singer. He was a symbol of a changing world. His life was a roller coaster of success and struggle, love and loss, and in the end, he left behind a legacy that continues to resonate with people all over the globe. As we close this book, we remember Elvis not just as the king, but as a human being who touched the hearts of millions. His story is a reminder that even the greatest of stars can have their struggles, but it's the light they bring into the world that truly matters. So, let's take a moment to reflect on the music, the movies, and the man. Let's remember the way he made us feel, the way he changed the world, and the way his spirit continues to live on. Thank you, Elvis, for the memories.